It's rough to be an innie. It's also rough to be an outie. It just rough. Sucks to be alive.
Hi, I'm Gabe.
And I'm Kat.
And we're the Ghouls Next Door. Please enjoy each of our sections individually and equally. Mm-hmm. Your outie enjoys creating gratitude jars.
Yeah.
And listening to SZA.
We must enjoy each thing.
Calm down. Settle.
Yeah. It's like, you must enjoy each of these facts equally or whatever. You can't get excited about any of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love on the internet all the people who are like, their outie really sucks. And just like, if my outie sucked, I'd be like, your outie likes to walk really slow on the sidewalk and take up all of the space. I'd be like, I would go them.
Your outie likes to make a lot of eye contact and say stressful things. I'd be like, what?
Why would they do that?
That would be wild. If my outie was neurotypical, I can't.
Yeah, what happened to you?
Why is
the process?
I was like, am I just so good at masking on the outside? You know, it's funny.
Wow, yeah. That's good. We're the Ghouls Next Door media literacy show from a horror lens where we explore the real life, historical, psychological, corporate influences behind our cinematic fears. And surprise, we're not doing a little teaser of horrors of society, because that's what we do. Okay, we cover the horrors of society every year ad nauseum, and guess what? It keeps getting horrific, and it keeps growing and expanding and finding new ways to horrify us, and so we're continuing it.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man.
It's a bummer. Previously I said 2 episodes. I was like, oh, we're just gonna do 2. No, we're gonna do 5.
Yeah. Gabe had their producer brain activated because of all the awesome media that has been coming out and being released lately, because wow, is the world a lot. Now there's a lot of media about it. It's been a lot for a minute, but like continues to be a lot. And we have a lot of trauma to process. And luckily, there are so many shows and movies that exist presently that do that. So it gave us a lot of content to discover.
Yeah. It just keeps going, you know, and I should have known when Severance season 2 came out and everyone was talking about it that of course we were going to cover it. We covered season 1. And I think, like, I was kind of watching over a little bit of our first episode, and I was like, I feel like we were kind of very much like the season 1 Innies in, like, we were, like, learning.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh, wow, corporate world sucks. Like, we knew that. Like, obviously, like, we knew about company towns, and, but, like, it was in recent time that we specifically covered, like, worker alienation, and we've covered, like, so frequently now, like, Amazon and its treatment of employees and all of the union busting. And for a company that has the most unions trying to happen and the most, like, lawsuits, like, there's a lot to be unpacked there.
Last time we were like, oh yeah, I'm seeing the signs of a dystopian world, and now we're like, we're in the dystopian world even more than we were before. Like, it was like, I kind of see the parallels, what's happening, and now we're deep in it. Parable is happening.
Yeah, we're here. It's coming. It's already done.
It's here.
You know, we're in the midst of the apocalypse in a way. So, not post-apocalyptic, current modern apocalypse.
We are apocalypsing presently.
Yeah. Absolutely. Definitely, if you have not seen season 1 or season 2 of Severance, you should definitely watch it before you check it out. It is more science fiction than I would say horror. It's definitely a thriller. It is more accessible that way, so if you are a scaredy cat of things, you won't be afraid of this. This is more
it's not
trippy,
scary. There's one instance where there's blood, and it's the last episode.
And it's like,
you
kind of we're kind of dealing with it as it goes, you know? I think, like, this came late because of the writer's strike and other things. Like, it definitely, like, they were really kind about postponing that and being respectful, especially for a show that's like care about your employees. It's very integral that they respect that in all the layers of, like, you're on Apple TV, you know. How much can you really be saying?
How much can you say? Yeah.
And you're, you know, produced by Ben Stiller, who's got
the calls coming from
money.
Inside the house.
You know, he's got a lot of money. But also, you know, thank you for being the call that's in this house. You know, somebody has to do it. So I am thankful for that. And so it is interesting that it comes out now after all of that, when it would have had happened before. And now season 3 is, like, you know, okayed and is gonna go. And so it's interesting. I felt like season 2 could have been the end. It would have been like, oh, I feel a little like I'm missing some stuff, but I don't think I would be incredibly disappointed if it had ended in season 2. I felt like that was an ending.
Yeah, they definitely, like, tied it up enough that, and there was already, they set up that it was gonna possibly be like this kind of interpret as you will with the future of Mark. But like, yeah, I kind of agree where I don't know if it needs to keep going. I'm glad it is. I feel like they'll keep saying cool stuff and the world's on fire. So I'm sure there's going to be even more stuff that we can talk about. But yeah, they maybe didn't need to. They ended it pretty nice.
And I do think this is along the trends, and I'll mention it a few times in my section, of like a season 2 of a show kind of taking the next step and going like, okay, now we figured it out. Now we know what's up. Now what? And I always appreciate that take from a TV show to continue the exploration and realize that the story doesn't end just when we learn things.
The main thing that I feel like has not been answered, and it might have, I just might be a silly goose who didn't pay attention, but what the goats were about. So hopefully, because I was like, why? What's happening with the goats? And I was like, oh, they're going to tell me probably. And then we got to the end and I was like, I don't understand what's happening with the goats still.
You know, I mean, goats are a traditional sacrificial animal. So
I know,
it could be
but
that.
they're cute little babies.
You know, for sure.
Why they got the goats in there?
Yes, I agree. But just as a disclaimer for folks, this might be a long one. Kat so helpfully explained to me when I was beating myself up about how long my section is, that it's a series. There's a lot of episodes. There's a lot of content that they go through that, like,
it's like 20 movies.
Do. There's a whole podcast about every episode. Like, people go through episode by episode. We're not doing that. We're summing it all up. So give me
2
a
whole
break.
Seasons. Yeah.
So let's hop in, because I think we got a lot of ground to cover. And like I said, definitely check out the show. And, you know, make sure you're watching both seasons, and then also, if you want to, check out our last episode on Severance so that you can catch up on what we were saying. But I'll tell you what Severance is about. So Severance, the show, started in 2022 and is still going. And this is what season 2's more or less synopsis is. I had to write it because IMDb only had season 1.
Oh, got you.
Which isn't the case of what's happening. So Mark leads a team of office workers whose memories have been surgically divided between their work and personal lives. After attempting a revolution to inform the outside world of their conditions, the severed employees have to fight for their right to exist and get to the truth of their reality. It's created by Dan Erickson. And in our first episode, we talked about how much we appreciated not only Dan, but also Ben Stiller for being very intentional about everything that happens. There is an answer to those goats, even if we don't get them right now. There's a lot of theories and things out there, and I hope that they feel comfortable enough in their show to give us what we think is happening.
Oh yeah, let the fans be right instead of a Game of Thrones.
Don't Game of Thrones us, please. So here's what happens in season 2 to kind of catch you up. If you've seen it, scroll forward, whatever. Season 2 picks up where we left off in season 1, where the audience, just like the Innies, have no idea what occurred since we saw them last. Now that we've informed the world of their living conditions and the inhumanity of the severance procedure, what's going to happen to them? We don't know. We pick up with Innie Mark returning to work, stressed and fresh from the realization that Miss Casey, who's been our, counselor, is his Audie's dead wife, and is concerned for the lives of his coworkers, his friends, and only other known people in his life, because they all just more or less stage a coup. He is met by a new group of coworkers, a promoted Mr. Milchick, and a lax version of the Lumen Industries he once knew. He fights to get his coworkers back, and they join his adventure for answers and for some of their own, his answers and theirs. And I'm going to go through kind of what the characters are doing, but because I think what's really exciting about season 2 is I think we get more of them individually.
Yeah.
Whereas season 1 was really heavily focused on Mark. So Irving struggles with the death of Innie Burt, his love, considering the worth of his own Innie life, and while also being concerned and suspicious of Helly, whose story of her OTC, her overtime contingency, isn't adding up. And Audie Irving, super sus. And then Audie Irving is getting to know Audie Burt and his husband, while slowly revealing Irving's complex history and feelings. In and out. Dylan, now aware of his Audie's life with a wife and children, is captivated by this potential wife. And Mr. Milchick, in an attempt to control Innie Dylan, creates visiting hours.
Perks.
Yeah, he loves his perks. So he creates visiting hours with Audie Dylan's wife, Gretchen. That's his new perk. Thinking this luxury will placate Dylan much in the same way his little perks did in season 1, only it unlocks parts of himself he had been hiding away. And he becomes far more vocal about the abuses and now, having seen the light, begins to fight in his own way for autonomy. He is, honestly, some of the biggest growth, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Helly is strange and as eager as ever to support Innie Mark, and Audie Mark finds Gemma, Miss Casey, but also to connect further with Innie Mark. Let's see where this little Appa's romance gets us, right? And it's revealed rather traumatically that Helly is Helena, and the real Helly is allowed to return after the death of Innie Irving, because he figures it out. Real Helly struggles to juggle her feelings for Innie Mark while also valuing the life of Audie Mark's wife.
Yeah.
And Helena's doing sketchy shit.
Yeah. Helena's like, I don't get any love in the real world. This man loves my Innie, so if I pretend to be her,
he's gonna love me. And it's like, you're not the same bitch, you know? You're a different bitch.
Yeah. It was a bummer that he couldn't tell the difference, but that's a whole other time.
Puppy dog eyes, rose-colored glasses. It's absurd to think, this girl was talking to him,
Yeah.
He wasn't thinking with the brain.
I know. It just made me sad.
The blood was somewhere else,
If I was Helly, I would have been sad. And
I would have been pissed. So. I would have been like, are you serious?
Yeah. We're not that alike.
The biggest reveal this season shows the truth behind the macro data refinement, which is what Mark and his coworkers are in that department, MDR, that it's a device that creates personalities and essentially torture for people. It creates severance beings, severance minds, people in a person. And for Mark, he's been creating rooms and severed beings for his wife, Gemma. And this will eventually lead to her death unless Innie Mark sacrifices himself and everyone he loves to save her, this woman he doesn't actually know. He knows Miss Casey, who's a different person. And we also learn Miss Cobell has played a much bigger role in the development of the severance procedure and refinement process. Now we understand why she might be so obsessed with Mark and Gemma. Yeah. She's got a lot weighing on that situation.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, too, is that, they don't let it happen because, spoilers. But the whole thing is, I think what the end goal was that to show that she didn't feel pain was for her to stab herself with the screwdriver. which would be how she would die. And if she doesn't respond like with a pain response, that would show she truly felt nothing. That's just my theory.
I also think like it was very specific what they were doing to her. And I think that really did solidify that's not Gemma, because she was not at all affected by that very traumatic thing that she was doing. It was very clear she was not herself. Something I think is important with that I think of with the theme of Severance is like no one asked to be born, period, but Innies didn't sign those contracts, so they didn't agree to do this, and so there's like
didn't ask to be born.
Yeah, that's just like such a like you're signing on someone else's behalf. It's like what's that thing that Britney Spears was in where they controlled her money and life?
Oh my god, I know what you're talking about, but I forgot what
it's
called.
Like that. The Audis have that. The Audis are Britney Spearsing their Innies.
Yeah.
And we need to free them. Also, I think it's important and something we've talked about before, but the fact that the macro data refinement, it being such a vague job, them just like, doing something that seems so abstract is really important because the Innies don't know what they're doing, which is very much worker isolation, right? It's you're making Karl Marx, exactly. You're making the screw, and eventually those screws are what keep a tank together that's going in to war, and we covered that in our Possessor episode, just talking about like the disconnect of like our job and the impact of them when we make it seem like it's not the full picture. But let's talk about the audacity of autonomy for Innies, because season 1 introduced us to Lumen Industries and their severance procedure, the surgically dividing employees' work memories from their personal ones, creating essentially 2 different people sharing one body. Okay, it's giving substance,
2
but
souls.
more. You are the same, remember, but you're not. What made season 2 so fascinating was how it built on that premise to explore a deeper question. Are these Innies, the work versions of these people, deserving of the same autonomy and respect as their Audi counterparts? Yeah. One of the primary themes explored in season 2 is the personhood of the Innies. Season 1 made us question the ethics of this severance procedure, like as a concept, but season 2 forces us to confront our own biases about whose life matters more and which team you're on, because that's what we're kind of left with. Like, literally the end sequence is like, are you mad that this happened or do you get it?
Yeah. Because it's like capitalism just programs our brain, unfortunately, to be like, you have to fight each other. You can't share and work together within the same form. It's a battle.
But it's also like, I think people were so surprised by the ending because we really hadn't given them the credit that they deserved as being full beings.
Absolutely.
After season 1, viewers were definitely eager to see how the Innie rebellion during the OTC would affect their existence in the Severance program overall. Further, we wanted Mark to discover the truth about his wife and reunite with her in the real world. Like, it's a totally natural thing to want. But I think a big part of what we may have all been missing was the reality of Innie Mark's life and how it's threatened by these very answers. Viewers seeking those answers completely disregard Innie Mark as a fully formed person with his own relationships, desires, and autonomy. You essentially become Audi Mark in that phone call with Innie Mark, or not phone call, the weird camera call. The camera call with Innie Mark. You become him. Like infantilizing him. The season finale brilliantly highlights this bias. Many fans express shock or disappointment at Innie Mark's choices. There's a lot of memes going around of wives being like, would you pick me or would you pick... It's like, that's a different guy, first of all.
Yeah.
I, of course, would pick my wife. Worker me, who's a different person, he don't know you from Adam. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, you can... That's your work life, whatever. But why were people so shocked or disappointed? And it was because they were prioritizing Audi Mark's life over Innie Mark's. They were prioritizing Gemma's life over Helly, who does not exist outside of this, right? They viewed Mark's relationship with Helly as somehow less legitimate because it existed only within Lumen. And that's exactly what the show wants us to question. Why do we assume the Audi's existence is more real or valuable? just because they have more freedom of movement or memories. It reminds me of how we sometimes compartmentalize our work selves as somehow separate from our real selves. It's literally the premise of this. When in reality, our work personas are very much a part of who we are. This compartmentalization only serves those in power, allowing employers to extract more from workers while treating them as less than fully human, right? If we compartmentalize that, and instead of like voicing our discomforts or our needs, then they can take advantage of that. That's why during COVID, when everyone was learned to work from home, is actually wonderful for some people, where they can like get household chores done, connect with their family, X, Y, and Z. They were like, wait a second.
Accessibility. Yeah.
Turns out I didn't have to do that. Turns out, and that's not to say that works for everyone, but it was this kind of wake up call for some people. We don't have to be different. I can be both like a parent or, someone taking care of my home and an employee. And honestly, and employee is the order that should be. But let's talk about the outies and their relationship with their innies specifically. That's what my big takeaway from this season was, because the show makes a fascinating point about how each of them views their work counterpart. Like each outie and how they interact with their innie is really interesting. So I think Dylan stands out the most as the only outie who truly respects his innie as a complete person with rights and personhood and what have you, like an independent being. Both versions of Dylan refer to innies as human beings whose lives are at stake. Outie Dylan's letter to innie Dylan confirms that this, as he acknowledges his personhood, saying like, he's like, I get it, you like, you're awesome, dude, live your life, live your truth, which is just like a crazy thing that no one else had said, right? Innie Dylan is the only one to call Innie Irving's firing a death, recognizing the existential stakes of what happens to innies when they don't come back to work. It's not just that they stop working, it's that they're dead.
Yeah.
That consciousness is gone. Will never be back. And then I also think when we look at outie Dylan's reaction to learning about Gretchen's kiss with innie Dylan, right? He doesn't dismiss it as inconsequential because it's another version of himself. He sees it as cheating. He's like, you did a betrayal because that's a different person. That's not me. He treats his innie as a separate being from himself, worthy of the same respect and consideration. And Gretchen, further, his wife, also understands the innies are independent beings. Her connection with innie Dylan allows her to reconnect with what she loved about outie Dylan before he became jaded by life. But she even sees, like, you're not my Dylan. Right? Like, I love you as well in this weird way, I like you because you kind of remind me of him, but it kind of just like reminds her more of her love for outie Dylan, and why she's suffered what she's suffered, or powered through the struggles of their life and put up with all his bullshit and him being real rude. I'm like, first of all, when he answered the phone and he was like, read the room, I was like, I'm gonna hang up and I'm gonna call back and we're gonna start this over. I'm gonna give you one more chance, buddy. Like, if you answer the phone to me like that, I'm gonna give you one more chance. Yeah. Like, you want to start over? Yeah. You get a freebie. Because after this, I'm coming to where you at. I'm coming to where you are. Physically, we're gonna be in the space, okay? It's like, no. Anyway, when she has that acknowledgement, and then further when there's that letter from outie Dylan to innie Dylan, it is a heartfelt moment that acknowledges the humanity in both versions of Dylan. He's like, I respect you, and you're gonna do what you're gonna do, and I think that's great.
Yeah, you have consent to not come back to work if you don't want to. I'm actually giving you that.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, which is crazy, especially for someone who we've seen clearly needs this job and clearly needs that validation to in turn say, you know what, if he doesn't want to come back, he doesn't have to.
Yeah. I do want to give a little shout out to Irving because he they just didn't give him as much lines that explicitly say it, but Irving was also trying to do that. Like when Bert retired, that was like a big thing.
Yeah.
So a little nod to him too. I think he really influenced Dylan a lot too.
Absolutely.
So love me, Irving. I'm so
definitely
sad
like a father figure for sure. And absolutely his growth happens too. Like he definitely was someone who was like, I'm head down, we're doing our work. And then after losing Bert, because that's what it is, he's losing him. And I think also Audi Irving having to navigate that relationship in himself. And clearly there's a history there. Like, why does he have the addresses of employees? He's worked for Lumen years before the severance process, same as Bert. So like we need more. We do need to see Terry to learn more about Irving. And Irving's a real one. He's the only one who sees Helena.
Yeah, he almost made me cry.
He was like, I was like, he better not die in the cold. What is happening?
Oh my God, same.
I was like, what happens to you, like, when you're Audi? Like, I guess he would be dead, but like, what happens to your family? They're just like, oh, I guess he died on the job in the wilderness, in the cold. He's an office worker. Question mark. Anyway, then we have Helena, who mistreats Helly from the get-go immediately. Yeah. She's awful. Not only does she override Helly's desperate attempts to quit, but she dismisses Helly's suicide attempts as essentially a tantrum. Which is like, that was season 1 evil Helena. Season 2 evil Helena tops. Because Helena having sex with Innie Mark as a power move against Helly, assuming her Innie would be gone forever, is sexual assault, since Innie Mark had no idea who she really was.
Facts.
She took advantage of that. And there's like, you can have...
And that was his first time.
Yeah.
So it's like...
he's a new person.
Extra. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sad about it.
It absolutely is a sad situation, because... Again, Mark didn't know. He definitely had just like puppy eyes, rose-colored glasses on. Oh my God, this girl's laughing at me. Thing that he couldn't see that was Helly. But he's also, to be fair, dealing with a lot. Okay, he's distracted as hell. And so I think we need to give him a little credit. And also, grace. He has been assaulted just as much as like Helly has been assaulted. Her body was used against her will.
Yeah.
Which is why like their moment together and having it be consensual, like reaffirmed consensual several times moment was so much more beautiful and authentic. Absolutely. Like it was healing, I think, for the two of them, which again also solidifies like Mark's decision in the end, because he was being himself. He was growing and becoming a person. So, but it really is like the ultimate dehumanization to treat Helly's body as simply a vessel that she can use however she wants, with no consideration for the other consciousness that inhabits it, that you awakened, that you brought here and signed your contract. No one has to be here. And she works hard to dismiss Helly's independence and personhood while betraying her on the severed floor, portraying her on the severed floor. But as Irving is quick to note, she is nothing like Helly, because Helly was never cruel. And while Innie Mark was consumed by butterflies and stars in his eyes, I truly think he would have been able to tell the difference too, had he been looking genuinely and not consumed by his own dilemmas. He had stuff going on. I think if he didn't have like, I got to find my Audi's wife. I have to figure out what's going on. What's happening with Irving? What's happening? Like, there's too much. And he's just supposed to be like, this girl who wants to kiss me isn't the real me, like the real girl. No one wants to hear that. And then even Mark, who we generally view as sympathetic, shows a fundamental disrespect for his Innie. The way he awkwardly calls Helly Heleny while talking to Innie Mark reveals how he views Innie Mark as a childlike, naive, not fully formed. Especially because Helena calling Gemma Hannah or something. Like clearly that's a tick to call your wife a different name and disrespect you. That's your own tick, and you did it to yourself. And he laughs him off. It's so dehumanizing and like demeaning when he's just like, oh, you got a little work crush. Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah, and I get like they couldn't have talked to each other before because it just like wasn't possible under Lumen. But Innie Mark makes such a great point where he's like, you've never even tried to know who I am before this moment, and you want me to kill myself to save you and your wife? I have love, asshole.
And it is super valid, and like every act, like when he's trying to merge his consciousness, it is always to use Innie Mark as a tool for his own needs. He never once acknowledges that Innie Mark is his own person. Even when Innie Mark's like, you're gonna kill me? And he's like, well, no, we'll like merge our brain. He's like, it sounds like he'll be you more than he'll be me. And he's like, well, I'm more important. So it's like super rude. And then on top of that, like mistreating him, calling Helly Helly, he asks Innie Mark to sacrifice himself, to die so that Outie Mark can be reunited with his wife. Not Innie Mark's wife, Outie Mark's wife. And that's an enormous request that completely overlooks Innie Mark's own life, relationships, and right to exist. And because Jimmet isn't Innie Mark's wife, he does not have that shared history of building a life, of struggling to conceive, of losing her in an accident. And he has a day-to-day work life with a work wife whose name Outie Mark doesn't even have the decency to learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like, he has a whole life. So that's what I just thought was like really interesting. I was like, Dylan and Irving were like, they were really doing great things. Poor Helly was just trying to like survive, you know? The other thing I want to talk about is how Natalie and Mr. Milchick are in the Sunken Place. So I think people have talked about this. There's a very specific scene where it's like, oh, of course they're in the Sunken Place. And while the severed employees certainly live a Sunken Place life where they're cut off from the real world and their bodies are piloted by another, Black characters, Natalie and Seth Milchick, also appear to be in Jordan Peele's Sunken Place. For those who somehow don't know what I'm talking about, first of all, what are you doing watching us? Go watch our Get Out immediately. Go watch Get Out. Watch our Get Out episode. But for those who don't know, in Jordan Peele's Get Out, the Sunken Place represents a state where Black consciousness is imprisoned. They're still aware but unable to control their body, which is now piloted by white bodies in consciousnesses. Or white consciousness is not their body. The severed procedure creates a similar bifurcation. However, in having to code switch and mold themselves into the lumen landscape, Black characters, Natalie and Seth, are in their own sunken places. They're Black professionals navigating a predominantly white, culty corporate structure that exploits and controls them in much the way that, like, before people were trying to hella dismantle DEI, were promoting and going crazy about DEI. This is like that landscape of time. So season 2 explores this dynamic expertly through Seth Milchick. Love him. I was like, oh, this is more time with him on the screen, and I was like, yes. If you watch our first episode, you know I have the biggest crush on him. Just the way he says stuff, you know.
Yeah, he does a lot of acting with his eyes.
Yeah, both of them do, honestly, and that's what I think is really important in these, because so much of their communication, Mr. Milchick and Natalie, is unspoken. It's literally like, if you know, you know, because they're saying something, right? Season 2 explores this dynamic through Mr. Milchick, the newly promoted manager of the macro data. Why do I have this accent every time I say it? Oh my God. The newly promoted manager of the macro data refinement department after the team's revolt. His promotion is clearly not a celebration of his abilities, but rather a crisis management move. And we see that because his computer still welcomes Harmony Corbell, the white woman who held the position before him. And it's such, like, to see it, like, affect him so strongly. Like, every day comes in as Harmony. Like it's just like he's an afterthought to them. He doesn't actually matter to them. Every day that he's not here from his own talents. It's awful. This detail brilliantly captures a reality many Black professionals face. Being promoted into positions without the proper support or recognition, often as diversity symbols or during moments of organizational crisis. I do think summer of 2020 was nice because it allowed for people to be like, you know what, no, we're going to hire people. Like, we love BIPOC people. We're going to hire them, which is nice because people were getting their jobs. But then from that came so many jobs of people being like, I was clearly put on this like pillar and I was used to like take pictures, and that they were not actually respectful or appreciative of my work and my worth, and were just using me. Like, I've heard so many people who were like, I used to teach DI to organizations and then had to stop because it was such a toxic environment. Like, that's crazy, right? So Milchick is constantly navigating microaggressions at Lumen. One big example is during his performance review. We learn that he's been anonymously reported for using too many big words, a criticism that reveals how Black professionals are often surveyed and judged by different standards. And his colleagues won't approach him directly, but instead report him to avoid accountability. It's very clear who was reporting these things.
Yeah.
No question, who is struggling with some big words. But I think it's such an interesting thing because, like, we know what he was saying.
Yeah.
You know? But they're like, oh, he's uppity. Oh, he thinks he's better than us. Like, he just is, he's a learned man. Get out of here. He's a beautiful, learned man. Leave him alone. One of the more disturbing and brilliant scenes in a show that's ripe with brilliance is when Natalie, the board's representative, presents Milchick with inclusively re-canonicalized paintings, essentially blackface versions of Lumen's founder, Keir Egan. It's laughably absurd.
It's like you're not actually fixing the problem. You're just rewriting history to make you look less shitty. Yeah.
Like you literally, you blackfaced him to be like, we're inclusive. Like, what is...
Let me see your board,
you
then.
You didn't, know? Let's see the anonymous board, right, that speaks through this Black woman. I want to see them. Yeah. How many of them are of color? Anyway, Natalie's schooled smile and dead eyes momentarily break when forced to claim she also received these paintings and found them extremely moving. What a brilliant actress. I saw an interview that they found her because she did a toothpaste commercial, and she had this big, wonderful grin, and Dan Erickson or whoever was the director of it was like, you do that one. Like, they were so excited about it. And so she's like, do the commercial. Like, inspiration. So when Milchick gives her a look that essentially asks, what are we doing here? We witness a fleeting moment of authentic connection. It's almost the exact like emotion and fear that we see with the maid in Get Out, where it's like stretching, and then there's like almost that she doesn't have the tear, but she might as well. It's that scene that everyone's like, that is just Get Out. That's Get Out. Same girl. Same life. It's like, and the board also speaks for Natalie as she communicates that the board would like you to know that I also received the gift. Like, she kind of distances herself and like, the board wants you to know that I liked this gift. Not I liked this gift. The board wants you to know that I did it, right? She is in control of her body in this space any more than the innies are of their outies, right? However, we could also interpret Natalie's phrasing to be a signal to Milchick that things aren't as well as they seem, or that she agrees with him, right? The board says, not necessarily Natalie saying anything, right? The board wants you to know that I liked that. Did I? Right, so it can be like, it's like kind of two ways, right? How deep in the sunken place is she? Is she savable? That's what I really hope season 3 we get to see them. So when Milchick attempts to connect with Natalie, suggesting their experiences at Lumen have been similar in some ways, and that the paintings evoked somewhat complicated feelings. Rather than reciprocating, Natalie retreats into her corporate identity. She understands that her positioning as a woman of color is central to her usefulness as the board's face. She goes everywhere for the board. She's the one who's talking to Rickon. She's like, she's the board, and there's a reason why they're putting her out there in the public. So Severance is exploring how corporations weaponize diversity and inclusion, and the blackface paintings are a perfect metaphor for how companies often approach diversity, superficially altering their existing structures rather than creating authentic space for diverse perspectives, right? They're performative. They're just surface level. We gave it a paint job, like we put a gay flag on it, but nobody here is queer.
And now in reality, they're saying the quiet part that they didn't say before out loud instead of speaking
exactly
in a Get Out kind of fashion of just like, Ugh.
Yeah.
That's gross. The world's on fire. Okay, continue.
Although to say that Severance may not be labeled horror in the same way that Jordan Peele's films are, but for its black characters, the corporate environment of Looming contains all the elements of a horror story, with its loss of autonomy, constant performance surveillance, and the erasure of authentic identity. They're in the Sunken Place. Very clearly. Lastly, I'll try to rush through, but I want to talk about the overtime contingency revolution, essentially the revolution that we're starting to see, and someone's got to give season 3. What I find particularly compelling about season 2 is how it moves from awareness of oppression to the beginning stages of resistance and revolution. Season 1, like I said, was about the Innies taking the red pill, right? Discovering the truth of their situation. Where season 2 shows us the painful, messy process of trying to fight back against a system with vastly more power and resources. It reminds me, keeps going, it's full circle, of season 2 of Squid Game, which is why we started this series in the first place, that followed the same red pill revelation into revolution between seasons. Both shows recognize that revolution isn't quick or easy, and it involves sacrifice, setbacks, and suffering before any real liberation can occur. We keep saying it because we're in the middle of the really bad parts. We are awakened. We've been awakened for a while, and now we're riding through the rough parts of it, and even the media we consume has not given us the ending that we need. We're in desperate need of some season 3s, right? And I think it's important to note, though, that Severance isn't presenting like a step-by-step blueprint for real-world labor resistance, like horror and genre media often does. It's using this extreme scenario to highlight actual issues of worker exploitation and bodily autonomy. Like, it's easy to say that if we saw people who were literally being severed mentally for a workplace, that's obviously like a problem. But it's, I don't know, I'm looking around. I don't know.
Some people aren't always calling out the problem.
Yeah, they're not calling out the problem. I don't know how much power we'd have in that situation, because we're calling out those problems now. Of course, they're not this like science fiction absurd piece. It's that workers are peeing in bottles. Like, you know, a guy died on an Amazon floor just like last week, literally. But like, you know, media over like exaggerates these very real issues to make them that much more obvious. To make you think, wait a second, that sounds an awful lot like our reality. And the show builds on historical and modern day woes, showing us how workers are dehumanized and exploited. In the use of science fiction, they can start the conversation of workplace control. It helps us see patterns that might be less visible in our everyday lives. At the same time, it depicts the power of collective action. The Innies are only able to make progress when they work together, share information, and coordinate their resistance. Like the OTC literally required all of them in some form, right? And as we look ahead to season 3, I'm curious to see how the show continues to develop this theme of autonomy and personhood. We'll see, you know, I hope we see more outie innie cooperation with Gretchen, Devin, and even Miss Cobell. And how will the show address the ultimate question of, in a world where Severance exists, what rights should Innies have? If they are indeed full people, should they have legal protection? A path to independence? How can these two people exist? Whatever direction they take, right? Severance has already given us one of the most nuanced examinations of identity, consciousness, and labor rights in recent television. It forces us to consider not just the ethics of a fictional technology, but how we view our own compartmentalized selves, like our work beings. And just remember that whether you're at work or at home, you're still you, and you deserve to be treated with dignity either way. And as a people, you should not be peeing in a bottle. All right, quotas, we don't need them.
Yeah, so in my section, I'll be talking like, it's similar to what we talked about last time. I will be real. I basically wanted to like follow up on what I talked about last time to give like more modern taste, because we were in a more optimistic time when the last time we covered this, which I'll kind of get into. So I'll be real. The Severance, like most horror themed media right now, hits especially close to home with everything going on presently. As we said at the beginning, the dystopia is in full swing. And it's depressing out here. Something that we see in season 2 even more is that it's rough to be an innie. It's also rough to be an outie. It just sucks to be alive.
It's just rough.
But when a person's whole experience and existence is a windowless office filled with manipulation and unjust labor practices, it's worth rebelling over. As Gabe said, your work self is still you, and they deserve rights and freedom and a window. And as Helly shouts in season 2, did you think that just because you gave us half a life that we wouldn't fight for it? Additionally, as we see in non-severed people, working for Lumen sucks all around, pushing people to do awful things for the promise of power that is never really delivered upon. And like I texted Gabe like multiple times where I was like, I don't want them to be evil. And Gabe's like, actually, they're not. And I was like, oh, wait, you're so right. Yeah, people are complex because these characters, this season specifically, which I'll talk about more, but they really show us that the middle management, not a villain. They're doing harmful things, absolutely. Their impact, not great. But they are just as much victims of this system of exploitation as the other people on the severed floor. If anything, they push them to work even more hours because they don't get to sever out of the situation. They don't get to divide that personhood. Also, severance can be like...
I was going to say, the amount of times that they send Mr. Milchick out after hours, like constantly, they're like,
what's
you have
his
to deliver this message.
Pay?
Yeah. And to that point where he was like, I'm not doing it anymore. And I was like, that's my man.
Yeah, like when Mark calls him, he's like, it's just a job, right? And he literally almost cries.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes. Oh, my heart.
Oh, okay. But I will say Severance is also like kind of an allegory for slavery. It's just like, that's what our country wants so freaking hard. And this really just like shows us that's what they want so freaking bad, you know? So as Gabe said, when I texted them and was like, why? People are complex in this show, and season 2 gives us so much more complexity than we had gotten in season 1. And I think that really plays to the strength of continuing the story. So as we face our own day-to-day struggles of being alive, drowning in capitalism and all its wrath, and in its lack of work-life balance, and we need money to survive, but it costs so much of ourselves, we, like Helly, might ask the following question: do people at the top really expect us not to fight back? Those at the top so vastly underestimate us as workers and operate as if they'll never face consequences. And I'll give them this. It does feel like that sometimes.
Especially right now.
Especially with the world being what it is. But Severance shows us that the less you give someone to lose, the more willing a person might become to fight back. Also, it's like if you have people you care about and you're losing them, you're going to want to fight this evil systemic problem.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance of oppression. Like you cross a certain boundary, you get to a person to the point where it's like, I got nothing else. I have to fight back. Like, you fucked up.
As the French Revolution showed us.
Yes.
When they underestimate the people who they've forced into poverty and say, let them eat cake, some people are going to lose their heads. It's just what it is.
I mean, even just learn from South Korea.
Yeah.
They were like,
they won. They successfully did it.
You. He's out. He's gone. Please take some notes.
But the moral of the story is, like, we've talked about how wealth, like, just corrupts a person's mind. And one of the biggest things that ends up happening is because they think they are gods and all powerful, and that they'll never face consequences. They'll never have a rebellion. They'll never have a revolution. And
that's why we need more
underestimating of a population has consistently led to successful revolutions. So last time we covered Severance, I spoke a lot about worker power. So with that in mind, let's start with the bad news first. We've unfortunately seen many shifts backwards in terms of worker power and autonomy in a job market that is volatile and realigning itself with archaic, power-hungry structures. Before, we had a lot more to be hopeful for. When we were covering this last, we had started to make waves of progress. Unions were being, like, they're trying to bust them, but, like, we were making strides. And it's not to say we aren't anymore. It's just, it's being drowned out by the overwhelming shock of all the awful. So after season 1, we were coming right after the Great Resignation. Workers had a ton of power. We had spent an extensive amount of time in the pandemic isolation with massive career restructuring, and lots of people just resigned from their exploitative and soul-sucking jobs in mass volumes. And what we're seeing now is that it gave us a lot of power, but because the administration shifted, a lot of things have reverted back, because now companies are like, basically, as someone who was recently looking for jobs, posting things that aren't real to trick investors to thinking like they're doing better than they are, posting jobs that they're never going to answer. And also just like not feeling compelled to hire new people because the workforce was a little traumatized by the Great Resignation. It was necessary. We needed to stand up for ourselves. It's not a bad thing. The bad thing is who's in power right now. If we did not have that happen, we would be continuing rolling the ball forward.
You gotta also think of like they're being held hostage, right? Like with the tariffs and the fact that like jobs, entire organizations are being shut down. Like we're losing those jobs as well. Like people, like the workforce and the like employers are being held hostage.
Absolutely. Small businesses taking a ton of hits. It's like, it's really rough out there. There have been some victories and losses on that front too, which I unpacked. Companies like Starbucks, Amazon, union busting, illegal practice. 2025, I don't know if you've read it, Project 2025. There's a lot of stuff in there about outlawing unions. Historically, they've never been able to. Like specifically on April 24th, there were a lot of losses in court for Trump. So like people are fighting back. We are getting some wins. It's just really scary out there ultimately. As Gabe was saying, like a lot of things have just been lit on fire, and companies are scrambling essentially, and workers are scrambling. So we've also seen many companies restructure their priorities to adjust to a new market post 2020. There's a big prioritization of hybrid and remote work, as well as just more inclusive workspaces. As Gabe said, many were so corrupt that these were entirely performative, and others, like, they really shifted their entire way of operating to either performatively or successfully shift how their organizations were run to be more inclusive of not just old white men. And that's not to say that those aren't our priorities now. It's not true anymore. The demands are still more prevalent than ever, but the pandemic opened our eyes that we can have balance, and we've been fighting for that. We just have this administration, the Heritage Foundation, and Project 2025 to contend with. That's basically reinstalling heads of companies that align with their goals in mind, instead of the people who had gotten in finally and were finally making progress. So the parallels between Severance and a decline in worker power extend even further when we look at the non-severed employees positioned as villains. And in season 2, we start to see them crack under the pressure of entirely unreasonable expectations. And in another article titled, "We're All Innies Now, Apple TV's Severance Feels Too Real" from Psychology Today. Thank you, Gabe, for sharing that with me. They give a great outline of how federal workers specifically have been impacted right now and are living like their own severance right now under DOGE cuts and widespread uncertainty. So they're not severed, but they are experiencing the trauma that we see, like, honestly, like even Milchick and Natalie experience, and like Cobell experience, and just a big shift from like any kind of humanity focused work to productivity. So the writer says, as federal employees, I've watched some of the logic of severance seep into the workplace. After hours, fork in the road emails, you get like a 7 p.m. email and you're expected to answer it, seem even more veiled as threats dressed up as opportunities. What did you do last week? Check-ins are required to be sent to an anonymous inbox with no feedback coming back, and rumors on monitoring echo Lumen's constant oversight. Like Microsoft Teams being able to like really see what you're doing.
They can see when you stop
monitoring. Yeah.
Moving your mouse.
So teams vanish overnight without explanation, while others wait in limbo, wondering if the next email will end their decades-long career. But this is not just a situation in federal government. Across industries, workers are seeing psychological safety fade self-care diminished as indulgent, and autonomy stripped by rushed return to office mandates, and empathy treated like weakness. It feels like we're all the innies now, expected to follow orders, not ask questions, and suppress our humanity, not celebrate it. And that's the hallmark of this transactional leadership. And it's making a comeback. Leaders who once prioritized relationships are now walled off. Loyalty seems more important than expertise. Caring for employees is an afterthought at best. But we've known for decades that transactional leadership doesn't work. There's a lot of evidence to support this. Endless corridors of research show that trust, inclusion, and purpose, not fear and control, drive real results. It's like when you're thinking of, why does crime exist? Because you're not giving people their basic living needs. Let's just add more cops. It's very much that, but in careers. So essentially, even federal performance frameworks center feedback, learning, and well-being, but those principles are being pushed aside for speed, control, under the guise of efficiency. So every day we hear of worsening conditions and threats to worker power under the Trump-led Republican administration. The DOGE cuts were intentionally done to make sectors of government so short-staffed that they are inoperable, so that closing them will appear justified. It's literally just like scorched earth policy. Like, we're going to make it so that you're so frustrated when you call Social Security because you can't get a hold of anyone, and these like processes are so convoluted and there's literally no one working anymore, that like, you're going to be happy when we take it away.
Yeah, you'll be like, see?
Yeah, we got rid of that incompetent company. And it's like, actually, you're the one who did that, bro. It's fine. In good news, there have been pushback from the courts here, as I was saying, as these cuts did not follow the laws that had been established surrounding discrimination in the workplace, as well as legal processes when it came to firing procedures. Everyone's getting sued. What's lovely is that there's a lot of people who are like, consequences don't exist. I underestimate the poverty. And that they're getting consequences. Like the people who took that one woman out of a...
There was like a council meeting or not? City Hall.
They're all going to jail. Because they assaulted her unjustly, and that was not okay. Even though all the Republican senators were like, yay, they did it. And it's like, no, there's consequences for... brutality. You can't just do that, bro. So the law is helping. We'll see. They're towing the line. We're gonna find out as next time on Dragon Ball Z. We're just gonna keep waking up and seeing where the things fly, fighting as much as we can, and hoping that we all don't cease to exist. It's not funny. It's super sad. While some federal workers sit in limbo, having one being wrongfully let go, like there's an example, like the federal workers who were let go were told that they couldn't be let go. That was illegal, what they did with the big mass firings. So now they're not allowed to return to their jobs, but they're getting paid still. So
and they get
DOGE is not saving the government anywhere near what was promised.
No.
It's vastly incompetent. But we're in a history will tell us. Either way, at large, many federal workers are traumatized. And that's the biggest thing is like, there's been so much assault on like people's livelihoods, the sudden loss of like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to take care of my family? I had dedicated years upon years to this company who threw me away in a second, you know? And there's a trauma with that, and we're robbing people of their autonomy in doing that, because now you're not letting people be human at work. And all that's to say that Severance is topical as heck and relevant to our history, both in past and present day. So in another article titled Severance and Threats to Bodily Autonomy, Past, Present, and Future from Miss Magazine, they discuss the way Severance and Lumen relates to our real-world history, specifically when thinking of the episode featuring Miss Cobell and her life at Salt Neck. They say, the show's depiction of the fictional corporation Lumen Industries builds upon a history of real-world corporate malpractice and worker exploitation. And they cite an example of this as the industrial age, where factory workers were forced into labor, often women and children, to work in dangerous conditions for low wages. And when we think of this, we think of Cobell and the man from the town whose name escapes me. Do you know what their name was?
I don't.
Their friend who's lived there the whole life. were talking about being forced to work at Lumen as children, not really getting to go to school. Like there was a Lumen school, you know, like everything was run by Lumen. It was entirely controlled by Lumen. So giving every facet of themselves to this company that did not value them. And additionally, as Gabe was saying, thinking of Cobell in her youth, developing the entire program for Severance, like literally made the whole thing and got 0 credit. They threw her away as soon as they literally could. Like, they gave her no credit and they kept her where she was. And it was just similar to what happens in real life. Ultimately, this man, Egan, was like, I did it. He did not. He absolutely did not. He hired an intern.
He's a little weirdo freak.
Stole their idea like Spotify. So she got 0 credit, and Cobell and the other people in Salt Neck grew up in a company town, essentially, exploited by Lumen from the time they were born until they die. And considering how Gemma was exploited, maybe even after they die, you know? Owing everything they have to a company that doesn't view them as people. So the article continues to draw parallels to union busting as well. And we see this in Lumen's breaking up any kind of rebellion by retiring Innies, or any kind of rebellion by basically taking out their enemies. As we see Bert, his whole story is that he used to just drive people places, and he didn't know what happened to them when they got there, and they never came back. So examples of this in our recent history are corporations such as Starbucks, Amazon, and SpaceX firing pro-union workers, refusing to bargain for stalling negotiations, and intimidating workers. We also see this like for federal judges. Like recently, they were sending pizza boxes to like judges' houses and their children's houses just to be like, I know where you live. It's intimidation tactics, essentially. And if you have time, I also super recommend checking out the article titled Apple TV's Severance, the Role of the Jester's Privilege in Leftist Media Dilemma, because they unpack the limits of the show like Severance has when it's owned and housed under a company like Apple. I just found the article super interesting, and they also like tie back to a lot of historical context. So if like you have 2 minutes, go read that. Highly recommend. And basically it calls out the fact that like a company like Apple, who basically operates its own Egan, Keir empire of a business by like deifying Steve Jobs and like this tech industry. It's one of the previews for Severance had the CEO of Apple, and it's like, you're the enemy, bro. You're literally Egan. Like, get out of there. This isn't your joke, but it is because they own it. So how much can they really say? The show is essentially limited by its platform. But I will say, as Gabe said, like they do get to say a lot, even though it's like kind of like, if I make fun of myself, you can't hurt me kind of thing. So they're writing the narrative so that it looks like they're in on the joke when they're the problem. But media literacy, conflict of interest at play, just letting us everyone know. I also wanted to provide an update on company towns, because we mentioned a lot of company towns in our last Severance episode, and they hadn't been built yet. But they're getting built. It's happening. I'm not happy about it. Performance. So in our last Severance episode, I mentioned the creation of some new company towns, and I wanted to provide an update since that we recorded that over a year ago. So just to give a brief overview for those who haven't listened to that episode and do not know what a company town is. A company town is a community that is built and owned by a single company. Historically, they've been terrible and super exploitative, where a company provides housing, jobs, and various services to its employees. These towns often arise in remote areas where the company operates, and they can exert significant control over the lives of their residents because there's literally nowhere else for them to work or get resources, including their work, social interactions, and even aspects of their personal lives. So Salt Neck, as we saw on the show. Last time I specifically spoke of Meta's Willow Village that has begun construction on housing units. So like they were a few years out, they're still planning stuff. They have broke ground. They're building those houses. We won't know the impact of it until people start to move in and live there, but it's being built, so it will happen. Considering everything else, it's very, very parable of the sower. Amazon has continued to own even more of Seattle, expanding its real estate for AI and e-commerce. They also made it so that there is an in-person working mandate. So similar to Philadelphia, efforts there, at least in Philadelphia, to increase traffic through their businesses. The main difference here being Amazon owns almost all the businesses in Seattle. So the reason they made the mandate is so that people will spend money at their owned businesses. So they're paying people and getting all that money back. That's the benefit of a company town. Very limited overhead for these people who are exploiting people. There's also additional company towns being constructed in Texas by our least favorite human, Elon Musk, specifically around SpaceX and Tesla manufacturing. What is super real about this is like they're in super remote areas of Texas. So like they are going to exploit the heck out of that community. And if we've learned anything about how Elon feels about other human beings, it's going to be bad. So as a fun anecdote, though, there have been company town specific protests of sorts with crosswalk terminals being hacked to play deepfaked audio of the CEOs saying satirical messages. This is both in towns where Musk owns much of the business, as well as Amazon and Meta hubs. An article on KUOW within the NPR network gives us some quotes from this audio, and it's basically in the voice of Jeff Bezos saying, instead of these little robotic voice that tells you to wait until it's safe to cross, at least 5 intersections in Seattle last week played something like this. Hi, I'm Jeff Bezos. This crosswalk is sponsored by Amazon Prime with an important message. Please don't tax the rich. Otherwise, all the other billionaires will move to Florida too. Does this actually solve the problem? No. But it's nice to hear things like this when you feel like the world is on fire, because there are people acknowledging it. Not no one is acknowledging it. But you kind of like when you have to go to work every day and you're like, quotas, Q4, and it's like the world is on fire. I don't care if we make Christmas sales, like it's just like, what do you mean? It kind of validates the insanity you're feeling every single day. To have something be like, yeah, actually, we're going to say that this guy's evil, because apparently it's actually super easy to hack crosswalk terminals.
I believe that.
Usually they have a factory password, and they're all Bluetooth operated, so you can just hack into it with your phone. So all that's to say is we don't have time for this, but I also recommend checking out 2 additional articles specifically about the art in Severance. It was just really interesting. So like a lot of the art that they used was very intentional in the background, and it was based off of actual paintings that like kind of show how art can be manipulated to present an idea of worthfulness. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like they're like essentially like the youthful convalescence of Keir has like the sentimental scenes of the 19th century, basically aligning the company's founder with religious and historical figures worthy of veneration. And there's been like instances where this has been used by MAGA and like Trump supporters, like specifically John McNaughton, who paints Trump like he's Jesus, like he is.
I've seen those.
Yeah, where he does like impressionist style paintings, or like him looking off at the waterfalls and the oceans. Like, they're really trying to like make them look like a king of sorts and trying to like build that nostalgia. So the articles are 6 centuries of painting in Severance from glasstire.com, and then also Art of Kitsch in Severance, which is just like a Blogspot article. But it was just really interesting, like showing the correlation between like the art that's displayed in the show and how that like has this historical context of it's historiography. It's like how the information is presented, and like manipulating public perception through media and art is a form of propaganda. So the art really plays into the fact that they're trying to use even, what's his name? The brother. Rickon's book as like propaganda for the Innies. And they're also using the art in a similar fashion to kind of like make Lumen look how it is, the art and how it's manipulated even for Milchick and Natalie. Similarly, it's like, it's just very much gross, but it's from real paintings that exist. So I thought that was really interesting to like kind of tie it back to the historical roots of what they're trying to imply through the art. So I recommend those articles just to geek out about art history, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's even something to say about the fact that like when they have the story, like almost like folklore of Keir, and
I think it's like actual mythology.
Yeah, and it's such like a bizarre Like, it really distances him. It makes him seem like this mythological being when he's just a guy. Like, he really was just a guy. But by painting the story in this, like, magical way, it makes him seem like this otherworldly being that graced us with his presence when it's just a story about his brother masturbating in front of him. You know? But they're like, soiled. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Helena was right for that one.
Yeah.
And I get what she was doing. She was laughing at Milchick. Because that's her history. And for her to laugh at it that way, and like I know part of it was like she was trying to be cool, like Helly, but she was laughing at Mr. Milchick. And that's like a really big deal because he's supposed to have some sort of power here, and she was reminding him he has none. Yeah. Those little things are so important. We'll see if we keep it, but one of the fun things, Kat, to maybe answer your question about the goats, there's this really fun theory that's going around. I watched so many videos of it, and I was like, I'll believe it. I'll believe it. And it's the theory is that Rickon is a goat's outie. So one of the goats in the Severance in the Lumen offices is tied to a person outside. So they make that, instead of making their body, they make it go. I don't know how, but the reason, or like they're connected in some way. And the reason for this that people have, like their evidence is, one, there's a picture in season 2, like it's a flashback. It's Gemma's history. And the sister, I'm totally blanking on her name right now, but she's like showing the picture, and Mark's like, this is crazy. Like, you could do any kind of outdoor activity. Why would you go hiking or whatever? And it's Rickon like scaling a mountain like a goat. Like, it's eerie. Like, and he even I think he says it. He's like, you're like a mountain goat. Like, this is crazy. Like, no normal person could do that. And it's literally in the same, like, very close to the wall, kind of sideways look. There's also people were crediting the in season 1 at the end in the overtime contingency, and Rickon is reading from his book, The You That You Are. The way that he's speaking has like a ba cadence to it.
From the leaping cat to the cowering shrew, think of themselves as you, a logical center for the universe.
Like, if you
that's so interesting.
If you listen through, like, he'll like, I can't think of the words they say. I'll definitely try to find one of the clips that people have, but he'll just be like, you are, like that, like almost like when Miss Dr. Dillamond kind of spirals into in his story, and he's like, you know, it's kind of like that, like, but just a little tinge of like normal. And then on top of that, in the opening credits of season 2, they have all the weird like warping of you know, it's a really great animation. But one, when we see the name for Rickon's actor, it's an image of a guy that morphs into a goat.
Interesting.
I think there's also something to be said about the intense sadness that the goat people, the people who take care of the goats, have, and the connection. And one, it could be absolutely read as like, they're weird. Right, they're strange people.
They just care about animals. I care about the goats.
Like, they feel really, they've raised them, right? Like, they care about them, which is like, you know, there's oftentimes like farmers and stuff definitely see it's like, this is cattle, like this is what death is a part of this thing. So like them being that like connected can sometimes be something. But it really, when she's like, how many more of them do I have to give? Right? Like, part of that absolutely could just be a care for animals, but there could be an extra layer to that heaviness of like, this is tied to a person. Because unfortunately for a lot of people, you got to make an animal, or you got to compare an animal's being to humans for people to give a fuck. So
that's true.
It's
that's fascinating. I believe, I hope they're right with the goats.
There's also the one
that's interesting as heck,
where they say his book is titled The You Are. What's a you? It's a lady goat. The you. Anyway,
that's
hilarious.
It
could absolutely be a stretch. I think it's crazy for all those things to happen. Like, for that, like, nothing feels not intentional in this show. Like, we know, we talked about it last time, Ben Stiller said, everything has a reason. If you put a room full of goats, you have to have a reason, or something has to be going on. So if they put Rickon scaling a mountain like a mountain goat and speaking in that very specific way, there gotta be a reason. It's gotta be something. Yeah. It's so interesting. Anyway.
I bet you he's a goat.
So
I love that. All right, the goats make sense. We'll find out season 3.
Yeah, season 3, TBD. Awesome. So that's our episode on Severance. I think, like the show, right? There's so much to unpack, and, you know, really happy to hear from you all about what you're seeing. If you have fun theories, if something you're excited about for season 3, how you feel about the Sunken Place showing up there. I think even there's a little bit of tethers too in the examination of an innie and an outie. Like, Jordan Peele, where are you at? Come on in here.
Where it's like, both of them matter. They're both people.
They're both people, and it's like in that same like hierarchy, right? Where we were supposed to think that the top tethers were more important than the tethers underground, and the only reason that they were different is because they grew up there. They didn't have the same, like, that's what we saw with Lupita Nyong'o's character. It's the same thing. Like, you could be. Anyway. That's a great episode. Thank you, Kat. And thanks, you know, to the team at Severance for making such a great show. Even if it is on Apple TV. Like, I get it.
Thank you, Gabe.
You need money, you know? Like,
yeah,
scientists, they need grants to be doing the science, right? Like, I get it. Yeah. That's why Black Mirror, they got to be on Netflix, and they still poke at subscriptions. They still poke at technology and the insidiousness of companies like Netflix to their face. Yeah. They have Streamberry for that reason. That's their Netflix in the world. Anyway, we will be talking about Black Mirror at some point because there's some pretty good things that happened this recent season. So stay tuned. That'll be later this year. But we do have some more episodes in our horrors series, Horrors of Society series, because that's society is horrifying.
Horrifying.
Horrible. Yeah. So please subscribe.
When we're old, it's less. I hope it's less horrifying by the time we're old people.
Yeah, like we pass the baton and our kids are like, we don't have anything to talk about. All the shows are about butterflies and rainbows.
I want it to be boring.
We have trees everywhere.
Look at our planet not on fire and dying. Yeah.
Like, it was rough for you.
What even is these problems that you experienced are gone?
I wish for that world. Or we're just all in a simulation. They just upload us into a new one. I'll take it.
Bro. Give me cheat codes. Okay, yeah.
All right. Don't get married.
Bye. Delete your kids. I forgot our phrase.